steps to the right. Ready? Please.
Don't move, don't move.
Oh, I'm not moving.
You must undress. This is the rule.
No, you can't go.
And what are we gonna do with her? We're gonna her! No! Come on, yes!
The story begins in the picturesque state of Georgia. A truck is driving up a hill, carrying 3 pals. Chris and a couple, Daniel and Alicia, are out for a walk. Daniel gets out of the truck first to investigate their camping location. Chris suggests to Alicia that they expose their secret love to Daniel, but she declines because she and Daniel are getting married on Saturday. The secret is that Chris and Alicia are dating behind Daniel's back. Daniel signals that it's time to start their trek. They follow him and begin their hike. As they travel, they talk about how the mountain was once a battlefield. Soldiers left many hidden bombs during the war. They uncover a big stone on the hill's summit. The trio ascends, and Daniel asks Chris to conduct their wedding since he believes that love is more essential than a lavish ceremony. And having Chris there is sufficient. They are all taken aback, particularly Chris, who has emotions for Alicia, but he goes ahead with the wedding because his closest friend has requested it. However, in the middle of the ceremony, Chris stops speaking, leaving Daniel and Alicia dissatisfied because they are almost finished. Chris confesses he feels odd, and then leaves. As night falls and the stars appear, they begin their evening by starting a fire. Chris doesn't answer when Daniel keeps asking him what's wrong. Chris's illogical responses start to irritate Daniel. He gets up to quarrel with Chris at that point, but Alicia steps in and suggests a toast. Chris and Daniel stop fighting. Chris ultimately ends the wedding by announcing Daniel and Alicia as husband and wife, just as they are about to head back to their tent. As they enter their tent, the pair is elated and intoxicated. Daniel starts to undress Alicia and give her a kiss. Since Chris is able to see them and is grieving over them, Alicia urges Daniel to shut the tent. Chris puts out the flames while Daniel and Alicia continue their private moment. Chris wakes up from a sound sleep in his tent as the light starts to rise. He sees a man searching through the possessions of Daniel and Alicia. He gets up cautiously and moves toward the man, confronting him. Chris fights with the odd man, and they argue until Alicia and Daniel show up. Chris didn't realize the stranger was Devi, Daniel's hiking buddy. Chris expresses regret for what he did, and the tension between them starts to ease. Devi instantly pardons him, saying he would have done the same. Devi goes back to the truck, takes out Alicia's camera, and suggests that he snap a photo of the 3 of them. The 3 of them agree and get ready for the picture. Devi tells them to make a small adjustment because of the angle. He leads them slowly to the left, where the scenery is breathtaking, until something unexpected happens. A buried bomb is stepped on by Chris. Devi grows agitated and tells him to stay put. Devi reassures Daniel and Alicia that he will get help from the town, even though it will take 4 hours, while they begin to fear since they are unsure of what to do. He begins to leave when they ask him how long. As the 3 of them become more panicked, Daniel yells at him to hurry. While talking about how to deal with Chris and avoid leaving him, Alicia and Daniel withdraw behind the big stone. Daniel's phone then rings, raising the possibility of a signal. Daniel calls the guy on the other end and asks for bomb specialists and a helicopter. He says he will let Alicia know they aren't going to save Chris anyhow as he hangs up the phone. Alicia is taken aback and fails to understand Daniel's meaning. Then, angry, he goes back to Chris and confronts them both. The fact that Chris had told Daniel everything was unknown to Alicia. Both of them express regret to him, but it's too late. They learn that Daniel had planned everything out from the start. Devi had put the device, and there was no signal in the first place, so the call was a deception. For both of them, Daniel is furious, illogical, and full of hatred. He dismisses their apologies, begins packing his things, and leaves them behind as well. He withdraws to a stone far from the bomb where Devi had disappeared, and he extends an invitation to enjoy some beer. Alicia is trying to figure out how to disarm the bomb on the other side. Daniel threw the pin far away, and she finds it. She also starts looking for a fallback strategy, which calls for Chris to jump out of his current location when the bomb goes off. A strange local man approaches them as they are working out the strategy together. They ask him to help them excavate the earth. Fearing that a crime is being committed, the man, Ilya, and his dog rush toward them. Thankfully, no one is hurt when he shoots someone. They describe their situation and fervently plead for assistance. Regarding her relationship with Chris, who is not her spouse, Ilya challenges Alicia. Despite her reluctance, Ilya demands to know the facts in order to assist. Chris starts to lose his temper, but Alicia tells him everything about their covert relationship because she needs his help. Chris lashes out and chastises Ilya when he taunts her now that she knows. As the debate continues, Ilya starts to touch Alicia, but Chris begs him not to. Ilya agrees to assist them, but she has a requirement. He wants to spend a special special time with Alicia by himself, but they both decline, giving him their possessions instead. Ilya nods and starts looking through their belongings. He locates Alicia's panties and gives them to his canine companion for sniffing. He says he needs Alicia's underwear, the one she's wearing right now, to assist. Now that their lives are in danger, Chris is furious but powerless to stop it. Chris tells Ilya that he has a credit card and $360 in his pocket. Ilya says he doesn't want US dollars, but he accepts both. Instead, he wants her panties. Alicia is forced to obey, and while she is going down to her tent, Ilya stops her and insists that she undress in front of him. Despite her initial reluctance, she grants his request. She hands Ilya her panties while she is holding them, and he happily accepts them, sniffing them as though they were brand new. Ilya has finally gotten what he wants, and starts digging to help them. However, he asks what her precise instructions are. According to Alicia, the hole needs to be deep enough for Chris to leap into and 2 feet away. A radio rings from Ilya's knapsack as he is digging. With a glimmer of optimism, Chris and Alicia encourage him to contact for assistance right away. He gets his stuff back and talks to Sergey, a friend. The soup is done, he says, but he's helping 2 Americans who are stuck. Chris becomes irritated and constantly curses at Ilya, which annoys Alicia, who is desperate to use the radio. If they don't cooperate, he threatens to stop helping. Ilya constantly asks for something in exchange when Alicia begs him to lend the radio. Alicia was impatient and desperate. There was no time for games, she said Ilya, and Chris was in danger. Ilya threw her underwear and made her fetch them like a dog, just as he was ready to let her use his radio. Alicia was incensed but powerless. Ilya ordered that she get them by crawling like a dog. She knelt, lay down, and crawled to get the underwear, even though it was embarrassing. Ilya stated that dogs use their mouths, but she grabbed them with her hands. Frustrated, Alicia crawled back, chewed the underwear, and carried it to Ilya. Alicia eventually held the radio in her hands and began talking, but the person on the other end was unable to understand English. Ilya was requested to assist with the translation. He consented, but only provided they engaged in a game in which each word he interpreted required Alicia to strip. Outraged, Alicia told him to get lost and refused. Taking the shovel, she began excavating herself. Ilya told her that his friend Sergey was concerned about him and was on the radio. Fearful yet resolute, Alicia assured Sergey that Ilya was okay despite Sergey's lack of English comprehension. Ilya took charge and made Alicia take off her clothes as he spoke with Sergey. Chris pleaded with Ilya to end the game as Alicia started to undress. Ilya pointed out that Sergey was still discussing the soup before becoming irate, grabbing his suitcase and leaving. Alicia became enraged and lost interest. After that, Ilya pointed his shotgun at Alicia, forcing Chris to bargain with him as Alicia fled. Angrily, Ilya gave his dog instructions to chase her, and he did. Chris spotted a chance to seize the shotgun Ilya had dropped. Taking the chain Daniel had tossed earlier, he planned how to retrieve the rifle. Chris managed to aim the gun at Ilya, who was now using a knife to hold Alicia hostage. Furious, the 2 men swore at one another. Alicia was harmed by Ilya, who sliced her neck and made her bleed. Chris was afraid he would hit Alicia, so he was hesitant to shoot. Ilya exploited the circumstance by pulling Alicia behind a boulder and making her take off her clothes. As Ilya attacked Alicia, she shouted in agony and disdain. Chris watched helplessly, unable to shoot. Alicia attempted to crawl away as Ilya grew weary. Ilya became lightheaded after she struck him with a rock. Chris was about to pull the trigger when he yelled for her to approach him, but the dog attacked him, knocking him out. Chris was half asleep when Ilya explained that they were never really in danger and that the landmine was a hoax. Alicia was struggling for her life with terrible injuries when Chris woke up next to her. He cried out for assistance, but nobody arrived. A family was home a few days later in a nearby suburb of Georgia. Chris, a young American traveler, came on their door and said he was disoriented and needed assistance. He requested directions or an old map because he was unable to use his GPS. Tanya offered to print him a map. Chris went inside after accepting their hospitality. Chris was waiting when he saw Ilya working at a bee farm in the distance. Ilya arrived to look into it after hearing his dog bark. When he saw Chris entering the house, he was startled. Ilya assured Chris he would take him to the city, but he was uncomfortable. But when Chris requested more food, Ilya became enraged and they got into a furious confrontation. Chris agreed to wait for 15 minutes while Ilya spoke with his family, so he followed Ilya outside. Ilya let his dog run free and followed Chris. Chris came back a few minutes later, clutching the bleeding dog and saying it had been an accident. In a fit of rage, Ilya reached for his shotgun, but Chris pointed out that it was loaded. Tanya and Lika came out to see what had happened after Chris shot Ilya in the legs. They asked Chris what they could do terrified. Chris threatened to shoot them if they didn't comply with his demands. Following Ilya's prior instructions, he urged Lika to strip and crawl like a dog after telling her to tie up her mother and bring her father to a room. Chris refused to stop when Ilya offered him money. Rather, he forced Lika to play a game called Stripper's Roulette, in which she had to take off her clothes and run the danger of getting shot. Chris was adamant about getting revenge on Alicia, despite Ilya and Tanya's entreaties. Chris unintentionally shot Lika in the head as hostilities increased, instantly killing her. Chris was shocked and appalled to learn that, in his vengeance, he had killed an innocent person. After losing his lover and being held accountable for yet another catastrophe, Chris is shown in the film's epilogue in shock and grief.
And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.